So before I introduce my next speaker, I do want to give a shout out to Nancy Levine from the Urban Institute and my immediate predecessor, Amanda, because they were the ones who put together the first seeds of thought of wanting to come here to the Hill. Nancy Levine introduced me to Dr. Jocelyn Fontaine. She's a senior research fellow at the Urban Institute's Justice Policy Center. She is committed to using social science methods informed by a pragmatic understanding of communities, families, and individuals affected by crime and disorder. The primary goal of her research is to make communities safer and policy more effective for the most vulnerable. Today, she will connect the dots across the various presentations you have seen and heard and highlight the common underlying themes.
Thank you. It's the introduction. I have a big task ahead, but I hope I'm successful, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there. So I'm Jocelyn, and I'm currently a senior fellow in the Justice Policy Center at the Urban Institute. For those of you who don't know, the Urban Institute is just down the street here. We're based in DC. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan social policy research organization that's really committed to using research and evidence to elevate the debate on economic and social policy issues of our time. We're deeply committed to conducting rigorous research and analysis on emerging, critical, difficult questions on economic and social issues, but we realize that the production of facts alone don't naturally lead to the improvement of conditions for people, families, communities, or systems. Therefore, we're a staff that regularly engages with local, state, and federal policymakers, which is why I'm glad to be here, police chiefs and corrections administrators, and community groups, advocates, and service providers with the goal of informing policy and practice that can improve safety, reduce violence and victimization, and inform the more effective, efficient, and moral, ethical use of scarce criminal justice resources. That's why I'm so delighted to be here at the First Division on Women in Crime Congressional Briefing. I appreciate being invited and sitting amongst a group of dedicated and informed scholars of women. And since this conversation is about informing policy and practice based on what we know from the research literature, and the folks in the audience here have been central to creating this literature and this evidence. So based on what folks have said, I wanted to highlight three cross-cutting themes of things that I heard quite a bit coming up again and again. So first is that there is the need to generate more evidence and more financial support for this data collection and analysis on the crime and victimization experiences of women and girls to improve justice and safety. As both Dr. Addington and Dr. Kobina discussed, and others did as well, women have unique experiences. Their stories, their experiences, their histories are worth empirical scrutiny, are worth attention. I believe Dr. Addington's remarks were focused on the need for more quantitative data, but I heard from others, and I would like to also highlight that we need more qualitative data as well that can reveal nuance, complexity, and supplement what we learn from the quantitative analyses. Women and girls' experiences as victims of sexual violence, of intimate partner violence, of stalking, and their experiences in the criminal justice system, two things that are unfortunately inextricably linked for women and girls, demand dedicated research attention and investment. We all know that women make up a relatively smaller proportion of those in the criminal justice system, but unfortunately that has been increasing over time, and their experiences are not akin to men, and we need more evidence on their experiences. What's more, I would say, our nation's over-reliance on the criminal justice system responses to crime, something that, of course, disproportionately affects men and boys, impacts the families of those men and of those boys, which are overwhelmingly women. The mothers and intimate partners of justice-involved men and boys, they often carry the burden of financially and emotionally supporting these men with little to no services for them to carry this burden. The second thing that I heard is based on the evidence that does exist, and the panelists went through a lot of it, and the evidence that we hope to continue to generate with more investments, we need to strengthen, modify, and in some cases create new policy and practice That is, policy and practice needs to be responsive to the evidence, and you heard a ton of it. There is research out there on women's experiences with crime, victimization, and the justice system, and there is the need to use this research to inform policies and practices for women and girls, again, with the goal of improving safety and justice for them. As Dr. Lovell stated, though I'm not necessarily quoting her, there you are, in her remarks about sexual assault kits, morality aside, our inaction, that is not responding with policy changes based on the evidence, costs us money and reduces our ability to prevent crimes and the emotional toll that these crimes have on victims. We need to do the right thing. Strengthening policy and practice can come in the form of harsher penalties for violence against women, as discussed by Dr. Clevenger, based on what we know about the role of sanctions in preventing crime and repairing harm, and I'll add the provision of services and how useful that can be, and the emerging evidence on the various forms that cyberbullying, cyber dating, and associated crimes can take. The creation of new policies based on emerging issues that are coming to our attention, as in the case of women coming from Central America seeking asylum in the United States due to gender-based violence, as Dr. Menevar talked about. And the improvement of policies to provide greater forms of accountability and responsivity to campus-based violence against women, as discussed by Dr. Richards. The third thing that I wanted to highlight is that there's the need for the translation of research evidence into policy and practice. And I'll be completely candid in saying that this is the difficult part. And there are scholars and experts that are more or less comfortable in doing that translational work. Yet it is often insufficient to simply produce research and to tell relevant stakeholders where to find it. It's also sometimes insufficient just to take the research to them through either long reports or short ones, to do briefings or presentations such as what we're doing here, though I appreciate being here. There is a strong need for researchers and evaluators, and I'll just broadly say experts, to collaborate and partner closely with practitioners, policymakers, and vice versa, to translate evidence into actual practice and policy. Using the example of the increasing number, or of trying to increase the number of women in peacekeeping and the policing profession, offered by both Dr. Raby Hemp and Dr. Cringen, the research evidence is there, has been there for a really long time, and yet we're not doing anything, right? Real change is likely to only come when departments can partner with experts to identify concrete, specific, and actionable ways to change their policy and practice. I recognize that this can be tough for research experts because this isn't our training necessarily. We're trained in methods and analysis, and our inclination is to defer, I think, often to practitioners and policymakers on how to do what they do. But there are so many missed opportunities in the inability to talk and struggle with one another, to grapple with the details, and how to actually change practice and policy to be responsive to the evidence. There's so much more to say about this, and I won't take too much more of your time, but the experts need to be, at least some share of us, more in the business of being change agents directly, trying to inform changes or refinements to current practice based on real-world conditions. The approach to the creation of evidence-based policy and practice needs to be pragmatic, of course, but for more transformative change, which is desperately needed in the crime and justice space, we need to bridge the divide between what the research says and what the practitioners are actually doing or what the policy is actually doing, including ways to make policy have more teeth. Again, it has to be based on an understanding of what's really happening in the field, where change can actually happen, but it's really critical if we are going to reform this criminal justice system and reform how we think about crime and victimization and disorder and being responsive to that in order for change to actually happen. Today, as part of bridging that divide, I am so grateful to be a part of this conversation, this discussion, and this effort, and I thank you for your time.